Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Babes in Bookland. I'm your host, Alex Franca. Today, I'm going to be discussing Life in Motion, An Unlikely Ballerina by Misty Copeland with my friend Brett. Welcome. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to talk about this book with you today. You have an extensive dance background. So, can you share with me and our listeners a little bit about all of that? Because I think I took like 2 dance classes and begged my parents to quit, and that's as far as it goes for me.
Started dancing when I was about 2.5, and danced in a company at our local college. There was a youth dance company, and then thought that my dance career was over at age 18 and just continued taking classes recreationally. At college, I went to USC, as did you, just in class and a couple shows. But then technically, professionally, when I began dancing in parades at Disneyland. Later, once I was in business school, started a dance company there was studios and is an app for kind of at-home dance fitness. We do use traditional dance terms and kind of are meant for those who have taken some sort of dance in their life. I, of course, am in no way at the level of Misty Copeland or a professional ballerina, but do have a long history with dance and quite a bit of experience in different types of dance.
Did you do a lot of ballet, or what was your dance field? I guess.
Good question.
What was your type of dance, Brett?
Good question. I did ballet from age 2 to I think I was about 17.
Oh, wow. So you got on point and all of that fun
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, did. And
Oh,
was
wow.
in the Nutcracker every year. Hip hop and jazz were probably my favorites, although I always loved and had a huge respect for ballet.
Well, let's get back to the book. It was published in 2014. This is her dedication. She writes, "To all the ballerinas and dancers of the world, our art is vital. Let's keep it alive, growing, and expanding." So, what did you think of the book overall, Brett?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I would be out in the world listening to this. I was even at Costco and I would have tears in my eyes because it was moving and kind of emotional at times. I've always really respected Misty Copeland. I've known who she was for many years now and known a little bit about her life story. So I was really excited to learn a lot more about it, and especially from her point of view.
Yeah, and it was a surprising life story.
Yes.
I had no idea. I remember hearing about her in 2015 when she became the first Black soloist at ABT in decades. I really enjoyed learning about Misty Copeland's journey. It was full of unexpected twists, especially during her childhood, which made me have an even greater appreciation for her. And while I wasn't surprised by the amount of racism she endured, I didn't realize how much of an anomaly she is in the world of ballet. I think maybe that was my naivety or my ignorance. I don't really watch a lot of ballet. I didn't realize, oh my gosh, this was such a big deal for her to be a Black ballerina. I think that was just me like not paying attention to the world. I also really loved as an artist, I recognized how she felt more of herself on stage than off of it. And I loved how even through times of extreme doubt and setbacks, she was able to push forward. She's very introspective in it. I think she takes a lot of time to be thoughtful of why she is the way that she is and how she's been shaped by the people around her, which I think is just a great journey for all of us to go on. And I really feel like she truly is an inspiration. I mean, obviously, and that she's able to take that role on willingly talks a lot about who she is as a person, because she talks a lot about the weight that she feels she carries on her back when it comes to representing ballet dancers and artists of color and young women of color. And I thought that that was really beautiful. And she makes it such a point to really talk about how important not just her journey was, was, but what her journey could mean for little girls that looked like her, and hopefully the doors that she could open through her path and through her experience. She just sounds like an awesome person, you know?
Absolutely. I would love to meet her in person. Definitely an inspirational book. If you are, a little brown girl, as she mentions many times in the book, that this is for
Mm-hmm.
the little brown girls, I think she has absolutely opened doors, set a wonderful example, broken through glass ceilings that absolutely existed. I did always kind of know how meaningful her ascent was to her position. You don't see a lot of diversity in dance, lack of diversity quite obviously in skin color, but also a lack of diversity in age, in body type, in physical build.
Yeah.
It has traditionally been very exclusive
Mm-hmm.
and frankly kind of boring in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thrilled, over 10 years ago, first seeing Misty dance and learning a little bit about her story. And now having read Life in Motion, I think she is my favorite ballerina by far.
And she deserves that title for sure. Okay, well, let's get further into the book. I like to start with some quick topics, and I like to start my quick topics with new words that I've learned. There were 3 in Misty's book. The first one was troika, which is a group of 3 people working together, especially in an administrative or managerial capacity. She writes this word in reference to maybe a dance that she does with 2 other people, but I had never heard the term troika before.
Me neither.
But I like that word, troika. Okay, the next one was itinerant. Actually, I was like, I don't really know what this word means. It's an adjective meaning traveling from place to place, or a noun, a person who travels from place to place. So I had never heard it. It was new to me.
Me neither.
Yeah. So itinerant, I feel like is definitely a word that I can try to work into my vocabulary. The other, I'm not quite sure. And next time I see a group of 3 people, I'll be like, oh, you guys are a troika. And they're all going to look at me like I'm crazy, but that's all right. That's life. So the next quick topic, Misty talks about how one of her mother's gifts to her at one point was a life-size cutout of Mariah Carey for her room. She also had a poster of Paloma Herrera, a ballerina whom she would later go on to be friends with. I was wondering, who did you have in your room growing up, Brett?
I had a couple posters. I had a Buffy the Vampire Slayer
Wait, movie or
poster
TV
with
show?
Sarah
Okay,
Michelle
TV show.
Gellar.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, TV show. Still a big fan of that entire series and of
Me
Sarah
too.
Michelle Gellar. I had a Britney Spears poster, also still a
Mm-hmm.
big fan. And then I had a USC poster.
Wow. Okay, so this part unlocked a childhood memory that I have not thought about for years. Girl, I had a door sized, I'm talking it covered the entire back side of my door. So when my door was shut, this poster was revealed of Billy Ray Cyrus.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. My mom hated
Is
him
that
growing up, but I was always singing that achy breaky heart song.
I was obsessed with Achy Breaky Heart, and I had completely forgotten that I had had this poster. Oh, but yeah, that was funny. Okay, let's dig a little deeper into her book. It was really eye-opening for me to read that she had such an unstable upbringing. Misty's mother moved them around quite a bit during her formative years. Once they sort of landed near San Pedro, they sort of stayed in the area, but still from housing to hotels. Misty is one of eventually 6 children, and she does talk a lot about the love that she has for her brothers and sisters. She had quite a few father figures through her life. Robert, who was a man that Misty had a good relationship with, he created much needed structure in her life, but he was extremely racist. He would yell at her brothers, make them stand in a corner for an hour, sometimes balancing a book on their heads, make them physically fight one another. I was just appalled
Yeah.
that a grown man is teaching children that violence is the way to deal with problems, especially because the brothers were really hesitant to do it and they were basically forced into hurting one another.
That was
It was
that was
bizarre.
really tough to read.
Robert would call Misty's little sister the N word. And Misty does make a point to say that Lindsay, her little sister, looked more African American than the rest of them. They were all of mixed races, mixed backgrounds. And she would say that Lindsay would get blamed for everything, even if Lindsay wasn't at fault. And she really talks about the struggle that she had with Robert, knowing that he had this really dark, horrible side to him, but yet provided something for her, Misty specifically, this structure. And he was really kind to her. And she does wonder if it was because she had lighter skin. She writes, deep down, I believe Robert had to have a good heart to marry a woman who had 5 children and, at least initially, treat each of them like his own. But there was such negativity and bigotry in his family. I think he succumbed to the pressure, and the ugliness that he'd grown up with began to ooze out of him as well. I'd see bigotry again and again in my ballet career, and it would hurt every time. But after living with Robert, it would no longer come as a surprise. I just can't imagine how powerless she must have felt in those situations and confused by how she felt about this father figure in her life.
Right. I mean, so firstly, I'm not a fan of her mother.
Misty has a lot of compassion and grace and tries very hard to understand where her mother came from. And I really appreciated that. But as a reader, her decisions angered me. As a mother, her decisions really angered me. The things that she would put her children through later when they're all living in a hotel room, and the children are left to try to find places to sleep in the living area of the hotel room while Misty's mother bunks in the actual bedroom with her current at the time boyfriend.
I was disgusted by what seems to be absolutely factual and true about her mother. And I thought Misty was extremely forgiving and compassionate towards her, and how she later kind of sided with her mother and has done her best to have fond, compassionate memories of her childhood with her, I think is great, in that that is probably important for Misty. But for me, and for someone who is first and foremost a fan of Misty, I have very little respect for her mother. And I think that Misty succeeded in spite of her and in no way because of her. She tells us about how successful many of her siblings have become. And I just really hope that Sylvia does not credit herself with their success.
Well, sometimes as a parent, you lead by example of what not to do. And it really feels like that's the lesson that Misty and all of her siblings really took. It wasn't mom is a great provider, mom is a great example of the way to be. I think it does seem like she provided fun times and tried to love them the best way that she knew how when she was capable of doing it. But the woman herself, she had so much trauma growing up. She was adopted and kind of bounced around from place to place, didn't feel loved. She loses the first love of her life to gun violence when she's in her early 20s, if not just 20. So this woman has a lot of trauma and a lot of baggage that Misty writes she just chooses not to deal with. And that ripples and seeps into her relationships and her actions later with her children, always kind of choosing herself and choosing the man that she is currently with over her children, which Misty does write
Yeah.
about. And it is always interesting to me when these women that I'm reading, when they clearly have a relationship with a parent in current day, but yet they let all the skeletons out of the closet and give these heartbreaking, accurate depictions of choices that her mother made. I always wonder, how does her mom feel?
I thought about that too. And honestly, I have to imagine there are a lot of anecdotes that Misty did not choose to write about and share for fear of really hammering on her mother. As we've seen, Misty is a very forgiving, compassionate person. I think she was very kind in her writing of her mom.
Misty does a really good job of trying to later understand why her mother was the way that she was in an effort to not be like her mother and not make the same mistakes and not carry on that generational trauma. She writes, as our lives begin to repeat the rootlessness that had haunted her own itinerant childhood, I wondered why. Knowing what she had gone through, why didn't she try harder to give us the stability she herself must have craved? And later she writes, we wanted a mother who was responsible, who either stayed married or stayed single, and who put her children before some random man. We couldn't understand why she needed a man at all, why we children were never enough. It's just one of those things where you're not able to choose who your parents are, and it's up to you to decide what you can live with and what you can't. And clearly, family is very important to Misty, and she is able to overlook these things or come to terms with these things, is probably the better phrase, in order to sustain a relationship with her mom.
Yes. Through both my own experience and many people close to me, and then also seeing as an example through Misty, I think awareness of things that went on in your childhood and that you did not enjoy them and would not want to repeat them
Mm-hmm.
is paramount to breaking that cycle. And I think the siblings probably supported each other a lot.
Yeah, she talks about that. They all rose to the occasion. They all became parental figures
Right.
to one another.
Because Sylvia was kind of such an irresponsible parent, it was a miracle that she did have these other, so many children that could then take care of each other.
Yeah. Her siblings supported her. And then also, she found something special in dance. She talks about making up choreographed dances with her sisters to songs, which totally unlocked a childhood memory for me, too. I definitely did that with my friends all the time. It was so much fun.
Oh, me too.
And she tries out for the drill team at her school, and she becomes a captain as a freshman because she is just that good. And her drill instructor, Liz, pulls her aside one day and says, I think you should try ballet. There's the Boys and Girls Club, which provides free after school care. They have this ballet class that's taught by my friend. I really think you should check it out. It takes Misty a couple of days to finally check this thing out because she's shy and nervous about new experiences. And she finally does. And it's very apparent very quickly that Misty has an extreme natural ability for ballet. Her body lends itself to the art form, to the dance, and she's really quickly taken under this woman's wing, Cindy. Cindy very quickly realizes that Misty has a perfect ballerina body, which is described as a small head, sloping shoulders, long legs, big feet, and narrow rib cage. And Misty also writes that her legs were double jointed, so her knees would actually slightly bend backwards when she would stand straight, which kind of makes me squiggle in my seat a little bit.
Yeah. It's very rare that someone can become a dancer or a gymnast closer to puberty when over 10, 12 years old. I think she very much is a prodigy. And a lot of it has to do with, yeah, the muscles you develop, the flexibility, the muscle memory that develops from doing these things forever. And also the way your brain works learning and creating choreography. She happened to just be made that way, which is fascinating.
Yeah, she talks about how she could watch somebody do a dance step and basically mimic it perfectly right away. Okay, so Cindy very much starts advocating for Misty. She eventually moves Misty to her dance studio in San Pedro and continues her education there. She praises her, she calls her a prodigy, and she introduces her to the world of ballet. She made Misty feel seen and capable and talented. Cindy told Misty, "You're perfect." And Misty writes, I beamed. You're going to dance in front of kings and queens, she said. You will have a life most people can't even imagine. I began to believe her. Misty actually moves in with Cindy. Misty's home life has grown even more unstable. Her family lives in a hotel room at this point, which we've spoken about. With their current situation, Misty's ballet has become too much for her mother. So she tells Misty that she must quit. And instead, Cindy asks Misty's mom if Misty can stay with her. Misty writes, I believe that she knew this was it. She either brought me with her that night and into the world she believed I was born to be a part of, or I would never dance again. The two women huddled a while, talking softly, crying too. Mommy made it very clear that she had 5 other children. I was not, nor could I be, the center of her universe. I knew that, but I needed to be that to someone. I can't leave her, Cindy said, tears streaming down her face. I want Misty to come live with me. Then Mommy sighed and looked around the crowded motel room, and she let me go. And you had spoken earlier that you cried during this part. I teared up too. Definitely tears of happiness for Misty that she was able to finally be someone's center of their universe. What a beautiful, poignant way of putting that.
I loved that she had her appreciate her natural hair texture
Yes.
and color, and that she celebrated who Misty was naturally and gave her the confidence to be that person
Yeah.
without holding any of herself back.
Misty writes, Cindy, a white woman, also made me feel as if my blackness was the most beautiful thing in the world. I'd always felt good about being black, never wanted to be anything else. But to Cindy, my heritage gave me something more exceptional. Misty continues writing that she started wearing her hair in its natural curl. She talks about how Cindy's family were Jewish and that her Bubby, the grandfather figure, showed her a movie with Sidney Poitier and said, "Look at this black man who won an Oscar. Look at the barriers that he's breaking." She talks about how these people celebrated her blackness and helped encourage her to feel proud of it, which she also feels set a great foundation for when she had to face bigotry and racism and adversity in the very white ballet world later. Misty writes that Cindy's home is what she dreamed a home could be. She shares a room with Cindy's younger son, Wolfie, and she talks about loving Wolfie as though he was her own little brother and seems like they had a really lovely bond. And she really writes that it's a sanctuary at Cindy's house. They eat well. She talks about eating vegetables and fruit and having well-balanced, tasty meals for the first time. They watch ballet, they talk about art, they talk about everything. And she writes that her experience with her own mother was basically the polar opposite of her relationship with Cindy. Misty writes that conversation with mommy was succinct, often superficial. Mommy was just too tired to delve deeply into my thoughts and feelings. Besides, I'm not sure that she developed the skills to communicate deeply when she was a child and therefore couldn't teach us. By the end of the day, after working 9 to 5, raising 6 children, and dealing with an addicted or abusive partner, she had simply run out of words. And that made my heart break for her mom, too. Believe me, I have a lot of anger for her mom and the decisions that she made, but I feel like she is also a victim of circumstances. And there's only so much that she could have ever done without someone to teach her the way. And I think Misty recognizes that too. And I think that's why she really tries to balance the things that her mom does that are not good.
Mhm.
But Misty does an interesting job of trying to give allowances to her mother to help the readers understand maybe why she is that way. And it seems like Misty's done a lot of introspective work on understanding her mother too, which is really important. We've talked about that ad nauseum, so we'll keep going. So Cindy helps Misty grow as a dancer. She writes that the Bradleys taught her to think critically and would ask her how she felt about things or what she wanted, which to Misty was like a brand new world.
I thought her time with Cindy was beautiful. And I was so thankful that, this woman was kind of like an angel who she met by chance, through the wonderful Boys and Girls Club, and then found a home with and found what she needed in. I was so happy for her. I found this to be so heartwarming. And then I was so worked up and excited, which I'm sure we'll get to next, when she teaches Misty about emancipation. And I was cheering for Misty to do this and felt like that was her next stepping stone. She could now be in control of her own life.
I really did think that was the next stepping stone. Yeah. Yeah. That whole part, it was like a high to like a very low low. That it was, and it happened very quickly and in very like few pages.
Yeah, even as a big fan of her, I did not know about the custody battle.
Right. Or going on the Lisa show.
Right. And so that was all new to me. And that kind of surprised me that she already had so much notoriety and press just as a young dancer. So I found that really interesting, but and also really dismayed to read and hear about when her mom kind of was overcome with what I think was jealousy and tried to force her to come home. It obviously was not beneficial for Misty. She quite obviously was thriving and developing beautifully under Cindy's care. She was still spending time at home, having family dinners. She was in no way isolated from her family.
No, she was just finding her voice. She was owning and discovering herself in a way that she wasn't able to do when she was one of six children. She talks about how at home she just didn't want to be a bother. And so she would just kind of find a corner and be quiet and use up her time there. But at Cindy's, she felt able to flourish. So, Misty also writes that Cindy was very different from most in the ballet world. She believed that ballet was richer when it embraced diverse shapes and colors. There would be times in my career when I would struggle to remember that, but I eventually would come back to that conviction that the stage on which I performed was brighter for having me, even if some in the audience or dancing beside me didn't always agree. You've said that you feel like Misty succeeded in spite of her mom. And while I do mostly agree with you, Misty writes that she thinks that her circumstances growing up made her stronger, which in a way is in spite of her mom, but also is because of her situation, which I mean, you never want to be a strong person because you had to face so much adversity and like instability growing up. But she did get strength from that, which it seems as I read the memoir, I was like, Misty is definitely a silver lining type of person.
Yeah.
She always looks for the good in things. She tries to find the silver lining in everything. Okay, let's really get into the custody situation. Her mother basically comes to her and says, "You're not going back to Cindy anymore. You're done with this. You're not going back to her school." Misty later writes that she does feel like she might have been outgrowing Cindy in the ballet world. She definitely, I think, would have loved to have stayed with Cindy, but she does write that going to this new studio that her mom finds for her was really important for her ballet journey. But it's still a really sad situation because she was torn away from this woman who loved her and who wanted to see her succeed and would have been there for her. And she talks about how she didn't see the Bradleys for over a decade once all the dust had settled.
Right. I mean, the emancipation battle just got so ugly.
And Gloria Allred popped up.
Exactly. Exactly. I did some more research online after, like I said, I kind of wanted to hear more about the emancipation and about how that conflict resolved so quickly. Gloria said on behalf of Sylvia that Sylvia's main goal was to keep the family bonds intact without interference by third parties. And it's like, that's just such bullshit. As we know, she's brought in all sorts of other parties.
Well, she saw Misty slipping away. She saw her daughter slipping away in a way that none of her other children had slipped away before. And she wanted her back.
Well, and how petty of her mother to file restraining orders against the Bradleys, including against, I believe Wolfie was 4 or so.
It got unnecessarily messy and it seemed like an act of a desperate woman for sure.
I think she was absolutely taking advantage of her. And I was just really disgusted by it. And I was really sad that was convinced to go on this show, that she was convinced to cancel the emancipation petition, that Misty abided by these bogus restraining orders, that she supported her mother simply because she was her mother.
Well, she was still a child. Misty was like 15 at this time. I think she had to grow up really fast in different ways, but I think emotionally, she just would not have been ready to go against her mother and her entire family. And she loved her brothers and sisters, loves them so
Yeah.
much. They were all on their mother's side.
Yeah.
So turning her back on her mother was turning her back on these people that meant the world to her. What a horrible place for her to be in.
I'm so thankful for her that it all worked out and that she was able to reach her dream and maintain a relationship with her mom and her siblings. But obviously, the relationship with Cindy and the Bradleys completely disintegrated and died. And she was able to thank her, as we see in the end.
Yeah.
She thanks her during a speech and sees Cindy one more time, but the relationship is over. And thank goodness that the Bradleys were able to rise above it and just said, we will wish her the best from afar. I just, from afar, will never forgive her mother, Sylvia. At least her mother did not end her ballet career.
Well, that's pretty much what the rest of the book is about, her ballet career. We've talked a little bit about the physicality of ballet and Feels like Misty very much from the go is on a lot of people's radars. She basically auditions for all these summer intensives and she gets into all of them except one. And Cindy's like, well, the reason you didn't get into that one is because you're Black, which is absolutely crazy bananas, but that's just the way that it was.
We know how forgiving Misty is. She does seem to forgive the New York City Ballet and consider even working for them
Though she does say
later.
that she's like, that's how desperate you knew that I was thinking of trying to join this ballet company that had rejected me because of my skin color when I was a teenager.
Right. And I hope they are so ashamed.
I hope they are too. They missed out on potentially having the most popular ballerina in the world. Well, consequences, consequences. We'll get into how she got to where she is today, which she is still a principal dancer for ABT, her at 41. So I'd love her to do a follow-up memoir and kind of discuss aging in ballet and what that's like, but that's for another day. So she gets into the summer intensive at ABT between her junior and senior year. And she's actually offered a part in the studio company, which is highly selective. It's a very big deal. She calls her mother to ask her advice or permission, and this is what she writes. She was uncertain. I needed to finish school, she said, and I had already spent so much time away from the family. But then she surprised me. It's up to you, she said before we hung up. I think the year will fly by, and hopefully they'll make you the same offer next summer. But it's your dream, and I want you to feel good with the final decision. So I thought that was nice. Sure enough, Misty is offered a spot the next year. So she is able to graduate from high school. She talks about going to prom, which I was really happy for her because I think senior year and the high school experience is not something that can be replicated. And I think getting that degree is a really good thing and having that one more year with her family after all of the craziness that had happened with the emancipation. So, Misty talks a lot about the different mentors and the supporters that she has through her ballerina journey. She acknowledges so many of her mentors and supporters and gives credit to a lot of the Black dancers and artists who didn't get the credit that they deserve. I thought that was really cool. Like, she names the names. Like
Yeah.
she highlights them in her own memoir. And I really loved the way that other Black men and women who found success reached out to help and lift her up. She talks about when she came to LA and there was the actress who left her number and said, I was a dancer, like reach out, let me talk to you, let me be a support for you or a guide for you. And I just thought that that was really lovely because I think when people decide to bridge the gap, to reach out, to lift up instead of pulling the ladder away, I think that's how we connect and how we help each other. And I think Misty did a really good job of highlighting the necessity of that.
I loved her stories about Prince and getting to work with him and
Yes,
how supportive he was of
that was
her.
so cool. He just kind of called her up and was like, hey, Misty, want to do this performance with me? And then you want to be in my music video. And then she ends up going on tour with him. And I love how she talked about his artistry and also that shift in him of being a very quiet, shy person when he wasn't on stage. And then when he was on stage, I mean, he was just larger than
Right.
life. And he was impossibly talented. I love
Yeah.
Prince.
I loved that part of the story.
Now let's talk a little bit about her injuries. Let's talk about the first injury that Misty has. She's just been promoted to the core, so she's still really young, and she discovers a stress fracture in her lower lumbar. She writes, injuries are extremely common in the ballet world. Every day there is someone who suffers a stress fracture, a pulled muscle, a neck spasm, because we are constantly dancing, dancing, dancing. In a company like ABT, we feel fortunate to have so many talented dancers who can fill in as understudies when someone has to pull out, but an injury can be as psychologically painful as it is physically painful. One day you're on stage and you're the star, the next you're out with an injury and someone else is on the stage dancing your part and you're forgotten. Which, ooh, that's some all about Eve stuff. But of course, it makes sense. The show must go on. It's interesting because she has these two big injuries that seem to sort of start with her at ABT. And then there's one right at the end of her memoir, which her professional life continues, but this is where her memoir ends, kind of right after the second one. But she talks about how naive she was with the first one, how she was like, oh, yeah, I'll just bounce back and I'll be back and they'll be waiting with open arms. And they were, and it was fine. But it reminded me of how blissfully naive you can be with youth and how sometimes it really works for you. And that once you become jaded and you start seeing all of the ways that things are not supposed to work out for you, that it really feels like mindset is so important with how you navigate life and almost determines whether things are easy for you or are difficult for you.
Of course, yeah. I'm always amazed at the pain and the injuries, just the myriad of injuries that dancers sustain and continue to perform through. And you see then all these athletes and dancers kind of paying for it later in life with hip replacements, knee replacements, surgeries all
Ugh,
over the place,
yeah.
chronic pain for the rest of their lives. It's a combination of their personal choice to understand that that could be a consequence of continuing through an injury. So doing ballet is unnatural. Turnout is unnatural. Tucking your rear under and pulling up in your rib cage and shoulders down. I'm not describing it very eloquently, but the position you put your body in ballet, that's just your baseline position, is not natural. So your body will fight
Hmm.
against it. Through turnout and through doing this, you will force your body to become more flexible and malleable to this position. But the way our body works, it will work to heal those things as soon as you stop doing them. So that is why Misty continues to go to class and to work on all these muscles throughout their breaks, even weekends, any time off, so that her body stays accustomed to these positions and this flexibility. And so the fear with an injury is you end up taking any time off to rest your body, rest those muscles, that they will heal in ways that will make it impossible or even more painful for you to return to this discipline. So it really is a struggle between deciding what is the greater pain, what is the greater risk.
That's interesting that you bring up when you take time off, things in your body change because that's exactly what happened to Misty, not in regard to her physically having to become flexible or relearn some of these unnatural positions, but Misty finally goes through puberty.
Yeah.
She is 19 at this point. She has not menstruated. She takes, I believe it's a year off for her back to recuperate. And her doctor at the time is also like, wait, you haven't gone through puberty yet? Like, we need to figure that out. And so she gets put on birth control and she starts having a period and she goes from a prepubescent body to a woman's body. Now, I also want to say that when Misty talks about curves in the memoir, she is still talking about very thin, muscular curves, but it is still very different from the other dancers' bodies. So, because in my mind, I was thinking a very voluptuous woman. And then you look up pictures of her and you're like, oh, but in her reality, her new body was extremely different than the other bodies that she was dancing with. And she even talks about, she has the one line where she says, ABT kept searching for the girl that she was when she left before her injury in her new body, but they weren't finding it because she now had the body of a woman. She had breasts and maybe her hips had changed a little bit. She talks about how ABT would ask her to lengthen
To lengthen.
instead of lose weight.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, what a euphemism. She writes, I had breasts and muscles, but yes, I was still a ballerina. I noticed other dancers who also had more womanly busts, more muscular physiques, and ABT, seeing how hard I had worked, how well I was performing, eventually stopped asking me to lengthen. They came to see things my way, that my curves are a part of who I am as a dancer, not something I need to lose to become one.
So one of the things I experienced as a dancer was when you get boobs, everything feels different, looks different. The leotards you wear are a thin piece of spandex. They're not meant for chest support. No matter how tight and stable you
Yeah.
keep your core, and we as little girls would even notice that on other dancers. That's like, oh, wow, all of a sudden this girl got boobs. It's very interesting because, yeah, the traditional ballerina has what they describe as like a boy's body. I've never thought of it that way. I still feel like the body type is very feminine, but it is quite bony, very flat chested, and not really any curves other than perhaps having a very tiny waist and then just still quite narrow hips.
Ballet is definitely a dance that celebrates a very narrowed standard of beauty and standard of body. That's something that Misty is working and has worked really hard to have to change people's minds about that.
Right. Well, and thank God our standards of beauty are changing a little bit nowadays, and we have a little more appreciation for natural bodies and for diversity.
Yeah. Let's talk about Misty's second injury. She has been selected to dance the Firebird. This is an extremely big deal. She is the first Black soloist with ABT in 20 years. She is on the banner at the Met. It's an ABT banner, and it's the very first time that a Black woman and Black person has ever been the face of ABT. So it's a very big deal. She's had this lingering pain in her leg leading up to her performance. When she was traveling with the show, kind of workshopping it to get it back to New York, she knew that something was wrong, but she ignores it. She powers through it because she feels she has to. She writes, I reminded myself that there was a bigger purpose than my personal achievement. But after her first night dancing the Firebird, she knows that she has to stop. She writes, I had 6 stress fractures in my tibia. I had been in pain the entire 6 months I had prepared for the Firebird, unknowingly building fracture upon fracture. I was devastated. I had dealt with so much emotional and psychological pressure during my career, struggling to maintain courage and confidence despite the criticism of some who did not feel a girl with my skin color or body type could ever truly belong, a life of highs closely followed by the deepest lows. And now this injury. She writes in her diary, I don't know how much stronger I can be for how much longer. She continues, in those darkest moments, I felt lost and without a purpose. Without ballet, who am I? So it definitely does suck. She's been through so much and she finally gets what she wants. And then she has an injury that she has to address.
And the fear of not coming back at the level that you left at, or and also given whatever age you're at, that it might be the end.
And she's under so much scrutiny. She talks about how she's not just doing this for her, which really gets us into, I think, what the heart of the memoir is, which is about her journey, not just as a ballerina, but as a Black ballerina and what that means for the change that she is trying to make in the world. She writes in the book that there's an old adage in the Black community that we have to be 10 times better just to get as much. She puts immense pressure on herself to excel in this world, to shut up the naysayers, to prove that she is worthy of this. And when she gets cast as the Firebird, she writes, I felt a weight that I had carried on my back for a decade, slowly getting lighter. And you really feel that she had this, she doesn't call it a burden, this weight that she carries willingly, enthusiastically. I felt as I read the book. Like you said, she writes, this is for the little brown girls. She weaves that phrase into the book a lot. Before she's selected to dance the Firebird, she talks about how she would walk into rehearsal rooms and she could just tell already that a ballet mistress had made up their mind about her. And she's really starting to doubt herself. And she really feels that maybe ABT is not the right place for her. She's really courted by the Dance Theater of Harlem, which is a dance company filled with incredibly talented dancers of color. And she really contemplates leaving. She writes, the bitter truth is that I felt I wasn't being fully accepted because I was Black, that Kevin and the other leaders of the company didn't see me starring in more classical roles despite my elegant line and flow. And really at her heart, she was drawn to the more classical performances.
Right. And to most ballet dancers, the classical ballets are the holy grail. That's what you dream of being in. Those are the titles that the average person
Yeah,
knows.
exactly.
Romeo and Juliet, Giselle, Swan Lake.
Yes, all that. So she decides to stay because she realizes that if she ran, that's exactly what her mother did, that her mother ran when things got tough. She writes, I knew that mommy often handled difficulty by choosing not to deal with it. And she realizes that she wanted to know that she'd stood her ground, whether she got her reward or not. And thank goodness she did, because then the other theater troupe actually ended up kind of dissolving for about a decade. So if she had left ABT, ultimately this other place wouldn't have been able to provide her with the opportunities that she wanted. So I don't know if that was divine intervention or what, but
Exactly. And I don't think she would have had the legacy, that she has now. She rose to the top despite the challenges in a classically white company and just the world of ballet.
yeah, definitely. She writes, it's almost as if ballet is this exclusive secret society that's terrified of change, even as it constantly is looking for a way to stay relevant and alive. but I want everyone to feel that they could be a part of my world if they wanted to be. I am not just trying to shepherd and mentor new dancers. I also feel deeply that there is a huge untapped audience of ballet viewers. And among disadvantaged children or children of color who are often not exposed to this art form, I believe that ballet provides much to learn. Studies show that dancers have a very high rate of success in any endeavor they pursue because of the poise and discipline, both mental and physical, they must develop practicing their craft. Seems to me as an outsider that dance is just this perfect melding of athleticism and artistry in a way that it just isn't replicated in any other art form, really.
I agree. I think art is so positive in that it enhances joy, both from the person creating the art as well as the person viewing it, consuming it, but it also can ease pain and grief. I think there's something so emotionally beneficial about just all forms of art, dance in particular.
Yeah, you are physically the art form.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I think it's so fantastic that Misty shared her journey and her memoir with the world so that other people can maybe see themselves reflected in her and her journey, and other people can feel inspired, whether you are a young person of color hoping to be a dancer or someone like me who can't dance and can't understand the world that Misty grew up in, the way that the world viewed her. But I ended her memoir with such admiration for her strength of spirit, for her advocacy, for her compassion, and for her grace. She really is an incredible role model, and I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know her more.
Yeah. Another person in that has had her same experiences, could very well and very justifiably end up extremely angry, jaded, just mad at the world. But it goes to show how valuable it can be to offer forgiveness, to go into things with a good attitude, to work through challenges, and to go where your heart leads.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today, Brett. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. Definitely recommend this for everyone listening, and especially for anyone who has a background at all in dance. I think they'll really enjoy it and get something special out of it. And I'm so glad you inspired me to read it.
Oh, thanks. And thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye, Brett.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Babes in Bookland. To access the full version of this episode, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or support us on Patreon. Visit babesinbookland.com for more information.